All right, welcome back, and we'll be talking about City Hall in just a moment, but we need to wrap up this conversation about the central question, as it were, the president's statement, and Francis, I think you have some final thoughts on this one.
Absolutely, niko na yangu moja na Ivona kona yake moja.
So kumi yake.
So my point is, you're likely to see a lot of what the president said coming up, but at the same time, you see, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, there's some political leaders probably who would not have had the courage to face the president or tell him a few things, because there was a feeling that maybe 2022 is too far, and if you say some things, they may work against you. But now, the election that we were talking about in 2 years, 3 years to come, is now next year. So the president is at the tail end or the sunset period of his presidency. So you will see a lot of politicians now openly coming out to tell him a few things that may be a bit uncomfortable. But at the same time, you will see a lot more probably of the president trying to respond to some of those things, not necessarily to the politicians, but trying to explain some of the scenarios directly to the people. As to whether the people will listen and accept his explanation is a different ballgame altogether. But I hope in the next 18 months or so, there can be a semblance of, a report. This is what we promised, not just to the Mount Kenya region, but to the entire nation. This is what we promised. This is what we've been able to achieve. A scorecard of sorts, so that ultimately people can tell whether any work has been done or has not been done. I also saw some specific soundbite that the president was talking about, and he seemed to feel, and you'd see it, that good things are not associated with him. Good things are associated with his deputy. So that's why he was asking, so if you're talking about roads, water, electricity, and all other projects that are ongoing, whose government? Because he was trying to respond to that question of his side of the government, so to say, is seen as not delivering. But on the other hand, the deputy president's side of the government seems to be delivering. That's why I was saying, I don't make noise, I work from here. And it was actually, I even want to imagine there was a photo. He was saying, I work from behind this office, his office. He was saying, this is where all these developments that you're talking about are coming from. So kind of telling his critics that go out there, tell people about 2022 and everything else, but also tell them that the development that you're talking about, where it is coming from. So those are explanations probably that you would have done some few months ago, so that if you is said about you, you respond to it. And lastly, the dynasties versus hustlers question, it seems to have bothered him a great deal. You even remember him giving that example of a vehicle that was burnt. I've seen some people saying there's nothing like that happened, but be it as it may, you would see he was responding to that question directly, because it seems to bother him when you listen to him, that he is associated with the dynasties, and he comes from a popular political family. And when he mirror imaged that discussion with, if two families have ruled, then we can also say two communities have ruled. And so it seemed to unsettle the political discourse. And there was some laugh that the president gave that that thing seemed to have angered them. So them, obviously, is the people who have been perpetuating the narrative, the dynasties versus hustlers narrative. And he seemed to like it that he had hit them, he hit back one against them.
He had rattled them a little bit. Yvonne, the
fact that the president has got to explain that the development that you see is coming from my government is telling as it is. Politics is about perception. It's hardly about truth. But also that this interview just showed us that there's really no love lost between the president and his deputy. The divorce proceedings are well and truly underway. He says, I didn't make a deal with anyone. I made a deal with Kenyans. And also trying to paint his deputy president and the others as corrupt and thieves, something that we saw associated with Raila Odinga when, of course, during the political campaigns, when they were rivals, for the seat. That, I found interesting, that those are the ones who are stealing 2 billion. Like that just seemed, very interesting that he was, making those accusations.
And it's a good thing to recover that which has been stolen. Now that we have confirmed some money has been stolen, I hope now we move to the next step. Of, who has stolen, and how much, and how can it be recovered?
Francis, and how do we punish him before? Because he has said that corruption actually starts in his backyard. Do you remember when he talked about it being in State House? And that was, I think, in his very first term. So let's see whether he actually does something about it, because he said it before.
And one is hoping that after he spoke about it, the daily stealing has stopped, but who knows?
All right. Another 2 billion.
No, Joe, I think now we need to move on now to what is happening at City Hall. Joe, I really want to talk about that.
All right, because okay, just one last thing. Linus, did you want? No,
yake imeisha.
I think
it's just a quick response to what Francis and Yvonne have really illustrated quite well. The one thing that President Uhuru Kenyatta also said twice in Mululu and in his radio address is ukiona Simba amenyeshewa sio paka. I would want to interpret this further and say you cannot completely write off, even though he's a second-term president, you cannot completely write him off in the affairs of Central Kenya, in the political direction of Mount Kenya and the Kikuyu vote.
Yeah.
Because the Kikuyu vote and the Kikuyu politics have worked exactly the same way since Harry Thuku defeated Joseph Kang'ethe in KCA a long time ago. It is hierarchical, it is deliberative, it is also confidential. Kikuyu politics are not decided in rallies, for a fact. And then it's the decision, and you look at how Mwai Kibaki went about even his succession, and even the 2010 constitution, which was being treated in Central Kenya more the same way BBI is being regarded right now, with a lot of suspicion. Is it about Raila? It's never Raila, it's Raila. Is it about Raila? There was a lot of suspicion about the Constitution of Kenya 2010. What happened? A meeting. First of all, deliberations happened confidentially, and then a meeting at Limuru Conference Center, and then a press conference that says, we in Mount Kenya have decided to go this direction. Nothing that has happened will prevent that script from being played out again. And the other second thing that I would want to say about Central Kenya politics, elections are in 2022, August 9th. It's too early.
It's a long time. Actually, you've taken that statement from my mouth. I mean, very many things are likely to happen between today, the 21st of January 2021, to 9th August 2022. Many things are likely to happen. And you'll see some shifts here and there, so it should not surprise anyone when you see some interesting things happen.
So two things about that as we end. One is the fact that what I've said here before, a friend of mine once told me about the politics as we are seeing it now, that it is like we are busy painting a donkey, to make it look like a zebra, that when the time comes, the rain comes, the donkey might just go back. Like at the end of the day, at the end of the day, that the politics will kind of go to the usual corners where it usually goes, the same patterns that Linus is talking about. But I think there's also one other factor, which is which has been the key pillar, as I said, of the Ruto team campaign, this whole hustler versus dynasty thing. And I think it is it's a big gamble in the sense that it could absolutely work fantastically well, and we get something that we have never seen before, but it also has the possibility of going totally wrong, backfiring completely. I mean, we've seen some dangerous signs that it could actually backfire and become a very dangerous thing for the country if this thing gets out of control. And also we've seen that in some instances, some incidents we've been seeing over the last couple of days, where it even takes a tribal dimension, where certain tribes begin to be associated with dynasties and that sort of thing. And when it goes in that direction, then it becomes a totally different kettle of fish, and there's no telling whether it will be an asset or a liability when the rains come, as they
exactly what you're saying, Joe. I'm sorry. Now I have to say something about the hustler versus dynasty, Joe. I have to. I was listening to, I think there was a provost of
Samuel Wainaina, provost of All Saints Cathedral,
and he was talking about the hustler versus dynasty narrative that's going on, and he was talking about the dangers of it in terms of now how anyone who has anything anymore will be seen as a dynasty. It doesn't matter what it is that you have. For instance, someone who has a chopper is dynasty to someone who is in a car, or someone who is in a car is a dynasty to someone who's on a piki or boda boda, or someone who's in a boda boda is a dynasty to someone who is walking, and the reverse also is the same. So that there's someone who is walking is a hustler to one who's in a piki. One who's on a piki is a hustler to one who is who's on a car, and all the way to that. And he talked about how some groups, that violent groups, he talked about Ngeki, he talked about Chinkoro, he talked about MRC and the 40 boys, about how those were seen as hustlers, and they went on a violent rampage, and it was because of they were fighting because they didn't have and others did. So he was talking about how dangerous this trend can be. You talked about how it can either work or it can go and go into an absolutely different scenario and become a security issue. Something that started as a political smoke can end up being a political inferno if it is not now checked, I think, at this point.
Right, and that's because, sorry, just one thing, because it places, it doesn't place the responsibility where it lies, which is with the government to provide for resources, for opportunities, for jobs, but rather it is to say that I don't have because the rich or the person who has more than me has it. And so it misplaces the responsibility for jobs and opportunities in this country, not where it should be, and which is with the state and which is with the government. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that it is important for everyone to realize that the deputy president will carry both the triumphs and the ills of this administration, and maybe to some degree, Raila Odinga as well, because there are some projects he has endorsed. But one of the things is that he cannot run away and start to say, but they are not providing for the hustlers. Who is they? He is in the government. He was there when they provided, the promise for 1 million jobs. If they had provided those 1 million jobs, maybe this wouldn't be an issue. But it's just for me that it misdirects the responsibility.
The challenge, Joe, is this is the explanation that the deputy president and his team will give as to what, in their interpretation, is this hustlers movement. They will give an explanation of what they think it is and what they are looking for. However, there is the alternate. There is what it will be interpreted to be, and also what the opponents of this movement will interpret it to be. Yeah. So on one hand, you'll hear
and the people themselves as well.
Yeah. On one hand, you'll hear, the DP side saying this is about I hear him talk about bottoms up economic policies, but you'll also hear the alternative being said that this is also an explanation of you who have and you who does not have. So that kind of discourse can be very difficult, and that's why, as you said, it can work or it can backfire massively.
And